This video is about ND filters and, to be precise, variable ND filters. I will briefly explain the advantages of these filters and why it might be useful to use one. However, I will also show you what disadvantages these filters have and why sometimes a fixed ND filter might be advantageous. All shots are taken with Tiffen's variable filter, a filter used by many filmmakers, also because it's mid-range in price. Of course, the results are not the same for all filters, but the basic advantages and disadvantages are very similar for most variable ND filters. So have fun with this video. I will show you some shots with this filter right at the beginning. As I shoot as usual with Cine 4, I will add some contrast and saturation in post. As far as white balance is concerned, I will use Final Cut Pro's automatic correction. You can check if you notice anything wrong with the colors. For these first shots, I chose this beautiful location, and as you can see, it is very bright, so exactly the situation for which you could need a filter. Later, I will show you detailed comparison shots to show you the effects of the filter on the colors.
And I can't go back.
Overall, it can be said that the result is quite acceptable, and if you didn't know it, you might not immediately notice that the partly very strong ND filter was used here. Nevertheless, the use of the filter has disadvantages. Before I show you these disadvantages with a few comparison shots, I would like to briefly explain why such a variable filter is especially suitable for run-and-gun filmmaking. When you shoot a video, several images are combined to a video file. Usually between 24 and 60 frames per second are used. The same principles apply to capturing the individual images as in photography. A long exposure time and a wide aperture result in a brighter image and vice versa. A very short exposure time and a small aperture result in a darker image. A long exposure time also results in more motion blur. While this motion blur is not desired in photography because it leads to blurred images, a certain amount of motion blur is an advantage when filming, because it makes the video look smoother and more fluid. Especially if you shoot at a low frame rate, for example 24 frames per second, the difference is very significant. According to the so-called 180-degree rule, for optimal results, the shutter speed should be exactly twice the frame rate. For example, 1/48 of a second at 24 frames per second. The problem is that it is often too bright for this. Especially if you want to shoot with a wide aperture to create a cinematic image, a lot of light hits the sensor. In such situations, you are forced to increase the shutter speed to avoid overexposure. However, this will cause you to lose the desired motion blur and the video will look a bit weird and will have a nervous look. Shake is also more noticeable now. On a camera like the Sony a6300 or a6400, the problem of rolling shutter is also more noticeable, especially if you shoot handheld. The image simply doesn't look professional or cinematic. Sometimes a nervous look can be desired. In addition, a high shutter speed is not so noticeable with slow motion or shots with little movement. However, it is clear that anyone who wants to achieve a professional result should follow the 180-degree rule. This is possible, for example, by using ND filters. They reduce the amount of light that hits the lens. ND filters come in different strengths. The problem is that for perfect results, you have to change the filter whenever the lighting conditions change even slightly. On a professional film set, this may be normal, but for a run-and-gun filmmaker, it's very cumbersome. Variable ND filters in these cases could be the ideal solution. You can change the filter strength by twisting the outer ring of the filter. This filter from Tiffen, for example, reduces the light by 2 to 8 stops. The exposure settings on a camera can be set fixed, and you can react to different lighting conditions by changing the filter strength. Unfortunately, as always, there is a drawback, and this Tiffen filter also has a number of issues. In my opinion, the biggest problem lies in the color shifts generated by the filter. I tested this filter at different settings. You can see very well here that the filter at its minimum setting, and even if you set it to medium strength, produces an image with a very strong green color cast. If you then set the filter to the maximum value, it will produce a strong blue cast. So not only does it create a strong color cast, the color cast even changes depending on the setting on the filter. I have now color corrected the images with the automatic white balance feature in Final Cut Pro 10 and compared them to an image without the filter. I would like to avoid the time-consuming manual correction of the white balance. The goal can only be to find a simple and quick solution to the problem. After all, the filter should make my work easier and not more difficult. The green tint shots were very easy to adjust. The shots with a strong blue cast could also be corrected well, but a stronger saturation of the blue tones remained. If you use a grey card, it will be easier to correct the white balance in post. If you shoot against the sun, the image gets very soft and loses a lot of clarity, and you can't completely correct this effect in post. You should therefore try to avoid this type of shot. Some filters also show a so-called X pattern, artifacts or a vignette, depending on the setting on the filter and the focal length. With 80mm on APS-C, however, no vignette is noticeable with the Tiffen. If these disadvantages bother you, you should consider a fixed ND filter. The disadvantages of a variable filter should not or only in very reduced form occur with high quality fixed ND filters. The decisive downside when using fixed filters is, of course, that you have to change the filter or reduce the aperture if the lighting conditions change. So let's try to summarize these findings in a few basic statements and tips. For professional results, you should follow the 180-degree rule. The shutter speed should be exactly twice the frame rate. For good results, you should generally avoid situations with too much light. When shooting outdoors during the day, you need to reduce the amount of light hitting the lens. The amount of light can be reduced using ND filters. A variable ND filter has the advantage that the filter can be easily adjusted to different lighting conditions by twisting its outer ring. Such a filter is therefore very suitable for run and gun filmmaking and is very easy to use. Variable ND filters have several disadvantages. Depending on the setting, these include color casts, artifacts, a possible X pattern or vignettes. If you want to absolutely avoid these disadvantages, you should use high quality fixed ND filters. However, these are much more cumbersome to use. With this, I would like to say goodbye for today. If you liked this short video, give me a like as feedback, subscribe to the channel for more tutorials, and see you next time.